Hi everyone, John Travolta here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Florence and the Machine record, Dance Fever. This is a brand new LP from Lord, I Have a Headache, Florence Welch's Florence and the Machine. This project's fifth full-length studio album to date. With over 15 years of performing and recording records, Florence Welch seemingly has a lot to reflect on at this point in her career, and boy does she spend this record reflecting on life, on music, on love, on sobriety. This thing is seriously one of her most personal records yet, not just in terms of lyrics, but also in tone, as there are quite a few tracks on this LP that instrumentally and vocally take a subtler approach, something I've been hoping to hear Florence experiment a bit with on future releases, because Florence's early stuff really does tend to bring vocally the power, the fire, which is without a doubt a tribute to her talent and intensity as a performer, but I think Dance Fever brings a more calculated kind of force to the table. Whether that be the song King, which features a slow burn of groovy drums and bass, which sets the stage for Florence to be musing about having kids, but also needing that drama and almost that randomness in her life to be able to pull from as inspiration for what she does, while also rejecting roles and presumptions put upon her via gender, that she's no bride, she's no mother, she's king. The track says a lot about thrusting things off of you that may leave you in a position where you're less in control of your own life. And at the very finish, we get this immense crescendo of crashing drums, pianos, and vocal harmonies that coalesce into a burning ray of fire, with Florence leaving us with some parting words on the song about getting back on with the show, which is just one of many overt and covert allusions to Florence's work as a performer across this record. The song Free finds power in personal, emotional struggle. Instrumentally, the whole track feels like a Killers song in the best way possible. The sequenced beats, the driving and sparkly rock instrumentation. It's got a real pulse to it, and you can tell that Jack Antonoff has some production credits on this track too, especially with how those chaotic springy effects clash beautifully with the chamber instrumentation that kind of fills up the back end of this track. Lyrically, this is also one of Florence's most compelling songs too, as she describes being on this constant emotional roller coaster of ups and downs, feeling these moments to be so intense that she may need to be medicated or slightly sedated. Choryomania is a cute song title for another track that is seemingly about being caught up in emotions that are so intense it's kind of beyond your control. In this case, I guess the desire to dance yourself to death. There's even a great and poignant moment on the track where Florence talks about the death of rock music and how that's perceived because its resurrection isn't being done in the image of the people who kind of grew up with or maybe forged it or expecting it to come back. Again, strong sentiment, but one of many moments on this LP where it seems like what Florence wants to say or describe or communicate lyrically to the audience is kind of taking precedent over there being any sort of compelling or memorable melody during moments like the verses, something that will really carry us to the choruses or to the celebratory ending that has all of these shouty call and response vocals and pounding drums. There's kind of a similar issue with the song Back in Town as well, though this track does take a subtler approach vocally and instrumentally. All in all, this track feels less like a song and more like a musical narration that I wish was built upon more. But still, Florence does touch down on some very interesting lyrical imagery of a city that's just as grimy and uncomfortable as the romance that's set in it, with her describing having come for the pleasure but staying for the pain. The track Girls Against God is another moment that attempts a grand instrumental display, but weirdly, the crescendo, the layering, doesn't really go over as well as it does on every other song here. Saying it comes together, I think, is kind of generous. There is a cacophony and a bleed to the instrumentation and vocals on this particular track that reminds me of so many moments on like the last Spiritualized album, for example. And the larger it gets, just the blobbier it feels, which is kind of a shame, especially considering the song at the core of this track seems pretty solid. Thankfully, things do firm up on the track Dream Girl Evil, which is a roaring classic rock cut. It's a little Stevie Nicks, it's a little Stones, just kind of feels like very old school arena rock with groove and bass and grand drum fills and thick vocal harmonies. This is probably one of the biggest sounding songs I think Florence has ever put to tape. You know, if there are a couple of defining characteristics that I think make this record stand out in the Florence discography, it is its versatility and it is its dynamics. And it's so great to hear Florence at this point kind of experimenting with those things so well on this LP. On the lyrics of this track, we have Florence rejecting more projections and presumptions, almost describing this person who she's singing about enjoying more the dream or the fantasy of her than the reality, and also making her out to be a scapegoat. There's something really sinister and knowing, too, about the more intimate vocal passages of this track that read as like very Fiona Apple. I get a lot out of the song Cassandra, too, which I think is another interesting moment on the LP that seemingly connects to Florence's relationship with performing. The track, if you didn't know, is titled after Cassandra of Greek mythology, who was a Trojan priestess and warned of the fall of Troy, but nobody listened. Similarly, Florence here describes herself as being a predictor or a speaker of truth of sorts, and she kind of pays the price for that. She is stricken with blindness, the inability to hear, no one to sing to. All of this is being sung about and described against groovin' drums and bass and some really fiery, sour little organ licks. There's a kind of cinematic spoken word bridge on the track too. No dramatic expense is spared on this one. Now, the final leg of the LP I found to be sort of a mixed bag. There is Daffodil, whose heaviness and volume is a little invigorating, especially at the end, where it sounds almost like industrial with how distorted and pounding everything is, or at the very least like something out of a horror movie trailer. But oddly enough, this is one of the few moments on the LP where Florence's vocals almost like struggle to be heard a little bit here and there on the song. I catch more Fiona Apple vibes on the thumping and eccentric Heaven Is Here. It's a little Bolt Cutters-esque, but also feels kind of inconclusive by its somewhat abrupt and fizzled out ending. The gentle and jazzy The Bomb doesn't do too much for me either on the songwriting and melodic side, but I will say lyrically this is one of the more intriguing cuts here, as Florence describes an attraction not to love or being loved, but to the more, I guess, traumatic or negative aspects of any given relationship. She describes the other person as like being into her unavailability at one point. Yeah, this one is a wee bit toxic. Still, on the end of this LP, we do get the fantastically epic My Love, which is this string-kissed dance number that brings endless grooves, yes, but then also that otherworldly feeling and authoritativeness that you get out of a great Florence and the Machine song, too. The vocals and songwriting are so solid, the chorus kicks ass, too, and I love how Florence and her band are able to, recreate these tropes and sensations of an electronic dance music song, but pull it off with organic instrumentation, especially with like those staccato strings like skipping on the offbeat. The closer is another spot on the record that feels like more of a narrative meditation than a song, but I do love it instrumentally, and it does feel like a powerful sentiment to end on. Some of the instrumental sections here do feel like a little bit of a religious experience with the droning and heavily instrumentation, and some of Florence's vocal harmonies beaming down into the mix like rays of light through a rain cloud. The lyrics, meanwhile, paint a different picture of Florence really struggling, being in a point where she is frozen, she is lagging, she is needing to catch up with the band later because she is, dealing with an addiction, and is able to explore that in a personal way, but almost as like an archetype as well, kind of creating a parallel in the lyrics and the title with Elvis and Graceland and so on and so forth. So certainly a strong finish for the record. The interludes on top of that, I will say that I could pretty much take or leave, though Restraint is pretty interesting with Florence performatively delivering with this raspy voice, asking if she's restrained or quiet enough yet, which I think works into the album's overall themes of control or expectations for her to be, sort of very silent and out of the way. Overall, I thought this was a very good, very solid album from Florence, one where, again, she is experimenting a lot more with versatility in terms of instrumentation, style, dynamics, intensity. For the most part on these tracks, that turns out great. There are some cuts that production-wise feel a little sloppy, or songs that come off a little lost in the abstraction of whatever story she may be trying to get across. But still, Florence pulls through with some of her best songs and performances ever in her entire career. I'm feeling a decent 2 strong 7 on this one. Tran. Zishin, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Florence and the Machine, forever.